All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about buffs. Everybody hears I got a buff for this, I got a buff for that. And a lot of people have been asking me what kind of buffs are there, when should I use them, and how should I use them? So let's talk about the different kinds of buffs. Let's start off with your headquarters buff. So there's two ways to get to your headquarters buff. You can go in from your actual headquarters itself and click on Settlement Buffs, and that'll take you to this screen. Or if you're actually in your settlement, you can go to your headquarters and say settlement buffs there. There are basically two types of settlement buffs. There's combat buffs and development buffs. Combat buffs, as you would imagine, are the kind of buffs that you would use during combat. Let's walk through them one at a time here real quick and kind of give you a brief overview of what they are and when you'd use them. Recon Jammer is to protect you from being scouted in your settlement or in your home base. It does not protect you from being scouted if you're in a tower or if you're in the Capitol or you're hiding in some tower somewhere or you're in an AC or any other building than at your own home base. What it does prevent people from doing is looking at, if you've got reinforcements in your home base or that kind of stuff. So there are a couple of different kinds. Most buffs work in this way. There are multiple different time frames that you can select them, and they have different costs associated with them depending on how many caps you have to pay for them or depending on which ones you get in rewards. One thing to notice on each of these is that there are some significant differences in the other types of buffs, so we'll go over that when we get there. In this particular one, it's a 2-hour, an 8-hour, or 24-hour buff. It basically comes down to how long you're going to be doing it. If it's a short little AC fight and you're going to have attacks in the gray, you might want a little short 2-hour buff. If you're going out for hunting and a KE or something along those lines, you might want to use an 8-hour buff so that you've got plenty of time while you're out there and don't accidentally fall down and not know it. And then last but not least is your Recon Jammer for 24 hours. Um, this I use a lot of the times when I'm going into Capital. I'm going to be playing at Capital for 8, 6, 9 hours, and then afterwards finish up a KE or finish up, protecting and fighting for the state. Sometimes that can last quite a while, so you might need a 24-hour recon or during a kill event, also known as KE. So that's when you make the most of using your jammers. Obviously, your lower ones are going to cost less if you have to pay for them, if you don't have them in inventory like I do here. So those are going to be, you will only use the biggest that you have to use for that particular event. The next one on the list is the troop lethality. Now, let's talk about buffs in a sense for combat. You have four basic stats. You have your attack stats, your defense stats, your lethality stats, and your health stats. Your attack stats are based on how much attack you do to your opponent. In other words, how much damage your weapons would do to your opponent's army in general. And then you have your defense stats, which is how much of that attack that's being brought by your enemy can be nullified by your defensive weapons. Let's say you had a shield and they had an axe. The axe would do X amount of damage. The shield would do Y amount of defense. The next two stats that you have in there are lethality and health. Lethality is when that axe hits you. Let's say it was a whip. A whip may have a lethality of a certain amount, but an axe would have a lot more lethality, causing when it does land a blow, how lethal of a blow is it going to land? Um, I know I used specific equipment to measure it there, but think of it as just in general terms for your entire army. How lethal is your army when it lands a blow? And then health is the yang to the yin and yang of lethality health as attack and defense was to each other. So health is when you take a lethal dose or a lethal blow, how resilient are your troops to recover from that? What is the likelihood of them surviving that type of a lethal blow? The difference there would be they go to the hospital or they end up being lightly wounded and go back to your settlement. The key difference there is lightly wounded goes back to your settlement. And that would mean if they're attacking your settlement, then they're just available for a next hit. If you're in an AC or you're in the capital, then they're actually go back to your home and they're no longer there in the capital to fight. That's better than them going to the hospital, but it's still a matter of health or lethality. Or they can debuff the whole thing and live through it. So that's what your 4 buffs here are for. Troop lethality, same thing. You have a 2, an 8, and it's 12 hour. The big difference on these types of buffs is notice the percentage of the lethality on the 12-hour buff. It is twice that of an 8-hour or a 2-hour buff. So depending upon what kind of battle you're fighting and where you're going to experience the idea of which ones of these do you want to use and how important is it to you to have these types of buffs. They can be quite expensive. Like in the case of this one, you can't even buy it. In the case of this one, it's 6,000 for 8 hours is 6%. And in this one, it's 1,500 for 2 hours. A lot of them, there are some buffs up the top that you can buy with the highest percentages also. Lethality boost, you probably have to go and buy somewhere else. Maybe in the VIP room, or maybe you win them in packs or prizes or so on and so forth. Attack is the same thing. You have a 2-hour, an 8-hour, and a 12-hour. The 12-hour is 12% for 12 hours, as opposed to the other ones are 6% for 2 hours and 8 hours, respectively. You're going to want to make sure you pick the right one here, too. If you're going in for a short AC fight, it may not be worth using that Mega Troop attack boost so that you have that extra 12%, because you may want to save that for another event like SVS or a kill event where you're going to get that, full use out of it, as opposed to a short little fight that it may or may not make a difference. Keep also in mind the buffs are important for your percentage stats, but most of the time this is only if your stats are the ones being used. So if you're not the rally leader, or you're not the person that's stats are in leading in an AC or in the capital, then you will want to not waste these until you are going to be doing some PvP or something along those lines. Easiest way to determine whose stats are being used is in the reports, the war reports. You scroll down a little bit and it tells you source of your bonuses is AOG Matman. Or if you go down a little bit, you go into some of the other ones, you may find like here, source of your bonuses is Fat West. So it depends on whose bonuses and whose buffs are being used to if you want to use them or not. So putting that aside for a moment, let's get back to the buffs so we don't run out of time. So you start off with picking your lethality. You want to pick your attack. Defense is the same thing. You have the 3 different types of boost. I've noticed that the lethality and the attack the attack and the defense and the health all seem to appear in packs pretty frequently. I haven't had too much trouble with lethality up to this point. I just noticed that I was out of them, so that might be it. But I do have problems with these last 2, or the second to the last 2, the enemy attack and the enemy defense. Now, this one's a little bit different. This one does take the enemy's attack and it reduces it either by 6% or 12%. These are very expensive. They do not come in very many packs at all, so you won't just get them all the time just as you play your normal game or do your normal thing. Most of the time, these have to be purchased in the VIP store with your VIP or with your BIOS. And you'll notice they're down here in the VIP store under VIP 12, I believe it is. And they are 9,000 caps a piece. So a lot of the times I will purchase those when the survival of the fittest is going on, or when the alliance throwdown is going on, and you need to spend caps to get some points, because that racks up an easy 50,000 caps if you get a couple of those each. Getting back to our settlement buffs, so those 2 they reduce your enemy's defense and they reduce your enemy's attack. Reduces all enemy troops attack and enemy defense. That is an extra line that's in the stats. You'll see it listed in the stats independently, whereas the other ones are listed as I'm going to scroll down to this one here. So you'll see those, the first 4 you'll see in this troop attack, troop defense, troop health, troop lethality on the left-hand side. It'll directly modify the column, and I may even have a good example of that here, where here you can see we're 142, 121, 82, and 62. We go a little further 142, 121. Here it is. And here it is with them off. So this one, it was still on at 142, 121, 182, and 62. And if you remove the 12 that I had running, because I had all four buffs running at a 12%, it drops down to 130, 109, 70, 50. So those were directly impact those percentages. Although the other one, where you look down here where I had it running, you'll see it down here towards the bottom, right above that one with the red, where the settlement troop attack. You'll see the enemy troop attack minus 12%, enemy troop defense minus 12%. So that means in both of those cases, I had that buff running also. Now, keep in mind with your stats here, if you want to find out what the true percentage of your attack is for, let's say, infantry, you take that top line of all of your troops, get that 142%, plus your infantry attack, which is 915. Plus, you go down here to the bottom and see if there's any other modifiers. You get an enemy settlement troop attack, so you subtract 31 if you're hitting an enemy settlement, or if they're hitting you. So I guess that would be minus to their thing. And then there is a troop damage bonus, troop attack bonus, plus 32%. So you would have to add that in also. So it's a combination of all these that make up your stats for those. And that's based on the base percentage of your troops. So if a troop's fighting value is worth a certain amount, then you would add up the number of troops you have for that amount. So let's look at the infantry. Oh, don't want to do that, do I? Where is it? We're looking at infantry. Well, I know there's a way to look at it. Oh, I know where it is. It's over here. So here it says that the battle power of each of these troops is 94. So you would take, if I had 10 of them, it would be 940, and then plus or minus whatever percent ends up being. So if I have battle power of 94 and it's 100%, then it would be 940, just like we discussed. But if it's 300%, then it would be 940 times 3. So as you can see, that's how they calculate a lot of these numbers go around like that. So let's get back to the settlement buffs real quick. That takes care of all of these. And the last one is march capacity. This basically just increases the size of the troops leaving that you can send at one time. There are lots of these. You can purchase the 8-hour one with caps. The 12-hour one you have to get out of packs or you have to win in rewards. And you'll notice here the same thing applies, 6% on some of the small ones, 12% on some of the larger ones, enticing you to use some of the bigger ones. The development buffs, let's talk a little bit about those. The first one is used for gathering speed. So this is a fairly inexpensive buff. It's 24 hours. At the very bottom is the one that you really want to use here because you'll notice the rest are all 50%. You might want to use the 50% ones if you're not in a hurry or you're using it on a farm or something like that where you're not going to be paying close attention to it. If you're going to be doing some serious collecting, then you're going to want to use this 24-hour buff, and it increases your gathering speed by 100%. Now, what that means is it cuts it basically in half. So a 12-hour collection turns into a 6-hour collection, allowing you to collect twice as fast and to do twice as many. So if you send out your troops to collect a level 8 tile and it has 13 million resources on it, and it's going to take you 6 hours, then this would change it to 3 hours. Or if it was going to take you 10 hours, it would change it to 5 hours. It is fairly well one-to-one ratio difference there. I would use that anytime you're seriously looking to collect a large amount, and you're going to be there each and every time. You can see mine's running now, and if I go out here, I still have 3 out collecting. I had 6 out collecting, but I wanted to record this, so when the other 3 came in, I just didn't refresh them. I will send them out here again when this is done. So going on to development, you have the training capacity. This one basically just increases the number of troops you can train at one time. It really doesn't do any good unless you're in an accelerated mode where you're trying to use some other buffs provided by the state to help you train faster. We'll get into those buffs a little bit later. This one is strictly a capacity booster. It makes it to where you have to do less and less iterations. And so if instead of training 1,000 troops, if you do this and you get a 20% increase, you get to train 1,200 troops. The problem is if you're doing 1,200 troops in a normal scenario, it may go from 10 hours to 12 hours. And by the time you get back, your buff's over anyway, so it wouldn't have made any difference. But if you're using speed ups, during an event, in combination with other buffs and stuff, you may take your 10 hours, add 200, making it 1200, and then have a boost that brings it down to 6 hours, and then use speed ups to do your 6 hours and be able to train a lot of troops very quickly. So this one I don't find as being very useful because they didn't reduce the time of the training. They reduced the number of troops. They increased the number of troops you can train, which isn't quite as useful. Construction speed, this one is exactly the opposite. This one, you're talking about a 15% even for the 4 hour one. Anytime you're doing a massive reconstruction project where you're building a whole bunch of plasma buildings or you're upgrading a bunch of buildings or anything like that, it is always useful to do this, to use this buff in conjunction with your stat buff or with your talent buff, construction talent buff, and I'll show you where that is also. If you go into your talents, and I believe I'm going to switch to my talent set one, which is my war set of talents. And there's a video about war cell of talents and eco talents. So you need to watch them if you don't understand what that is. But here it's under eco. So under eco, there is a talent that you get out about this level, somewhere out here. Well, I don't see where it is now. Instant healing, tools, tech improvement. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's up here. No, it's down here. I don't know where it is, but I'll point it out to you. So here it is going to be under the eco talents, and you will have this one here, which is rapid development. Rapid development reduces your construction cost by 20%. This one works very much like the collection one. It is 20% right off of the top. It's not just 20% added to a bunch of stats that average out at the end. So something that takes you 5 hours to do turns into 4 hours. You use this buff in conjunction with so you switch your talents, you activate this buff, giving you 5 minutes to do upgrades, and then you use this in conjunction with your settlement buff to reduce your construction time 15% here, and you use that on a day where your governor has been nice enough to provide you with a fast work buff, as you see listed across the top here, is another 10%. You can literally reduce the amount of construction time by 50%. Now that means that you need to save your speed ups, and when that day comes along that your governor gives you that buff, you activate your buff from your HQ, and then you activate your rapid development buff within your talents activation under your skills. And then you have 5 minutes to use all your speed ups and upgrade all your buildings. Now, if you're very organized and you have your resources preloaded and everything, you'll be amazed how much you can get done that quickly. Okay, that gives you an idea of what you would use the construction buff for. That one's probably one of the most useful ones that you'll find. Research buff is also very useful, and it also is a direct time reduction buff. This one will reduce the amount of time that you have in doing research. You'll notice that the 15% starts at the 4 hour here, so it's very easy to get a hold of these, and they're not really expensive. They are 5,700 caps, but when you're talking about doing a lot of research, saving speed ups to finish the research so you can do the next one, 5,700 is a small price to pay depending on how much you're doing. You're going to have to weigh whether it's worth it or not, but that's definitely gives you some options to go through a lot of research. Next buff is food production. These last 4 buffs are all 4 work the same. They increase the production of the food, the wood, the metal, and the gas farms that are in your base here. So instead of them having, the normal info of this amount, it basically increases them based on those buffs that you do there. Other than at the very beginning when you first start playing, these are not really significant. They're not really a high impact. And I don't think they're related to this buff here where you can actually click on it, pay a small price, and you'll notice the little sparkles start. And it's also another buff. It may be the same. I don't know. I haven't used them a whole lot. That runs through the buffs from your HQ. So the next ones are going to be your talent skill buffs. You'll notice those are all lifted here. Your first one this is under eco. You have instant collect, which basically goes in and collects the next 12 hours from all your farms. If you're only a little short, sometimes that's very useful. You can do that and you get a whole bunch of food from them. The next one is your rapid development. This gives you 5 minutes, 20% off construction time, as we talked about before. And in the middle of capital or in the middle of a big fight or something, this one can be very useful. You can get 10% of your troops back instantly right out of your hospital. So if you have 100,000 wounded in your hospital, you click this button and 10,000 of them are instantly healed and back in your inventory. That can be very good if you're about to take a hit in capital and you're going to have some of them die because you don't have enough room. The second one is under the war talents, and under war talents, you have these buffs, which are basically your urgent recall, which is used to recall all of your troops within 3 seconds. Anything, including troops involved in rallies, and they basically just come running home very quickly. This is really good when you're about to get hit and you need to get out of there, but you can't, or you want to put a bubble up, but you can't because your troops are not home. That gets you home pretty quick so that you can do so. The next one is Massive March. This one is a 30-minute window. You have a 10% bigger march. So if you have let's say you have the ability to do 100,000 in your, to send out a march of 100,000 for a solo or add 100,000 to somebody's rally, while this is running, you get an extra 10%. So it would be 110,000. This I find particularly valuable at doing trap. It allows me to increase my marches by 10%. Through the entire trap, the whole 30 minutes. It's also very helpful. I usually save this for the last 30 minutes of RR, and I try to announce to everybody, hey, we're 30 minutes into RR. If you haven't activated your Massive March, do it now. And it kind of surprises everyone that you're fighting against. I also try to use this one in conjunction with the buff on the HQ to increase it there. If you increase it there by 6 or 12%, and then increase it here another 10%, you can have a pretty significant march size. Then you have emergency dressing. Oh, emergency dressing converts 30% of killed troops into wounded troops into the hospital. This is particularly good when you're about to attack somebody and you think you might lose, or you're going to take a whole lot of wounded. You activate this. I use this during SVS when I'm attacking opponents' hives, or when they come to visit us and I'm going to defend the state. I activate this so that is all troops that would normally die in those PvP fights get transferred to my hospital. Now you have to have room in your hospital. It isn't magically going to create room in your hospital, but it will allow you that if you're going to do a hit and you're going to lose 40, 50, 60,000, you can easily take 30% of that and save 18,000 troops and put them into your hospital. Or in the case of some capitals, you could take even more massive losses than that. So it's very good there. So that's those buffs. In addition to that, you have the governor buffs. We'll go over those very quickly here. The governor can give you a fast work buff, which is for the entire state for 24 hours, a 10% construction decrease in speed. Usually these are done during the survival of the fittest events or done during the prep stage for SVS and capital. The research acceleration buff is 10% for 24 hours. The troop treatment buff is 50% for 24 hours. This allows you to heal, usually at the end of capital, whereas the research buff is usually during the survival of the fittest and in your prep stage in order to encourage everyone to advance. And then training is also used in the training day on those same events. Try to, in conjunction with some of the other ones, can be very useful. That's those buffs. And then let's see if I've covered everything. I talked about HQ buffs from combat and from development. HQ buffs for skins is what I missed. So let's go over there real quick. Under skins, a lot of people don't understand that these skins that you're collecting here, the ones that you have available, if you click on this and it says attack 2%, these buffs are cumulative, and this is your total bonus for all the skins that you have, all the skins that you have loaded and activated. So if a buff is activated for 2 weeks, you get that bonus for 2 weeks. Although if it's permanent, then that buff stays permanently attached to you. As you can see here, I have troop attack for 4% right there in the middle of the screen, or right at the top of that window. Those will go away in 5 days as I activated them for an event, and I will lose that 4%. These permanent ones, though, however, will stay there forever. So once you get a permanent skin, once you get a permanent HQ, provides you with attacks. Marches provide you with a solo march speed, making your PvP a little faster, and frames provide you with defense. Obviously, we remember the difference between attack and defense. Attack is what the damage that you're going to cause to your opponent. Defense is the amount of that you can debuff or stop from getting to you or causing you any damage in the first place. That, combined with the state buffs and the governor buffs. Let's go into the governor buffs. We talked about the state buffs, which were here. The governor buffs are these four. The chief strategy is basically 10% construction, 10% research, and 10% training increase in speeds. That's fairly useful. It's very popular during the first day of most events because that's the day that you're going to be building and researching and using speed ups. Second one is the Mighty Ox. Mighty Ox is basically an 80% reduction or an 80% production increase into farms in your base. Master Medic is a 100% increase in healing speed with a 5k additional to your hospital capacity. This is often given out right after SVS, right after Capital, somebody who's got a lot of wounded still left. Warwolf is lethality of 10%. That means this causes 10% more, adds 10% to the damage or the lethality of your troops, meaning those that get sent to death as opposed to the hospital or not dying at all. This is used for a lot of different events and stuff, and it's usually people like to have this when they're going to fight in ACs or capitals or even RR. And then the Iron Fist. Iron Fist is 5% attack bonus and marching 2.5k extra march bonus. And then the last but not least is the Patriot. The Patriot is a training speed up of 50% plus 200 into your capacity. So it allows you to train more troops and faster. Used in conjunction with some of your HQ buffs, this one is very, very useful. I know I went really long on this one, and I hope that you understand all the buffs. And if you have any questions, leave a comment below. Make sure you leave me a comment. Let me know what you're looking for. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.